Hello, and welcome to your next edition of Thursday Thoughts. Today, we are talking about what is your grief. One is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. Two can be as bad as one. It's the loneliest number since number one. No is the saddest experience you'll ever know. Yes, it's the saddest experience you'll ever know. Because one is the loneliest number you'll ever do. One is the loneliest number. Whoa, worse than two. It's just no good anymore since you went away. Now I spend my time just making rhymes of yesterday. One is the loneliest number. One is the loneliest number. One is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. These are the lyrics to a song by Three Dog Night. While the verses were initially meant for a relationship breakup, it made me also think about loss. Lonely is the feeling of sadness of not having someone around. Alone is not physically having someone with you. As lost travelers, we experience both. Too often, after the dust has settled, the estate is distributed, our loved one laid to rest, friends and family have gone back to their lives. We wind up feeling lonely and alone. It will help us to understand what grief we are in and the different types of grief in dealing with the loneliness and being alone. So, grief is a strong feeling and a sense of sadness or melancholy, often caused by the death of someone close to us. The loss of something that helped you form your identity, like a job or a relationship or a home, or a wide variety of other things. When it comes to grief, I understand your pain. It can destroy your life and can rip away your hope and dreams. It can stop you in your tracks. So, to help you, I want to share with you understanding what type of grief you're experiencing and how it has helped me in my healing. In the 16 descriptions that follow, look for yourself. You may have characteristics of several types. You may cycle in and out of them and identify them. And so where you spend majority of your time, and that can help you to know how to help yourself. And so I also want to let you know that these descriptions will be in the YouTube description as well. So you can come back and refer to them. But let's just talk about them now. So normal grief, and that is something that usually lasts 7 to 24 months. However, it's an average and circumstances are unique. Anticipatory grief is a feeling of loss prior to someone's passing. This usually occurs in instances of cancer or mental health issues. So the dying process is prolonged, and there's a lot of fear and anxiety. Now, delayed grief is suppressed grief until it is triggered by another form of loss. It can either be life or divorce or job. And complicated grief, number 4, is the inability to accept a loved one passing, which is accompanied by prolonged grief. Typically, folks who are experiencing complicated grief shut themselves off from friends and family, losing additional relationships, and making it difficult to recover because they're isolated and they're lonely and there's paralysis of fear of moving forward. Number 5, disenfranchised grief is when there's a lack of social support, such as the loss of a fur baby. Many people who never have children or don't have other families really become close to their fur baby. And when they lose that pet, then others don't understand the grief that the human is going through. Chronic grief, number 6, is when the severity of the grief does not reduce over time. It is at the same level years later as when it first occurred. Number 7, distorted grief is being angry at the world with the possibility of hurting yourself or hurting others. And cumulative grief, number 8, is adding one loss on top of another. You may feel like you're doing well, but then another loss is piled on and you just don't know how to handle it. Number 9, prolonged grief impacts normal functioning and can be responsible for medical and mental health issues. The lost traveler frequently ties their self-worth and identity to the person who has passed. They may have lost all desire to move through their loss. I see this when a parent may say forever, Connor's mom. But the other thing is that when it comes to this prolonged grief, is think of when your kids or your loved one was in school, or you were a room mom or a soccer mom or something. I always was identified as Connor's mom or Hannah's mom or Brittany's mom. I was never identified as Peggy. And so that was one of the things, that's a type of grief as well, because my identity was tied to them when they were kids. Exaggerated grief is magnified through grief actions and words, and it can ultimately cause serious mental health issues for the lost traveler. That can also go along with prolonged grief. Masked grief is when a person denies that there's any loss or any reason to grieve. Collective grief is when a community comes together. This can be examples of natural disasters where we all come together, or terrorist attacks or acts of violence. And number 14, inhibited grief is when someone is grieving but not at the level of the relationship. Let's say that you have two siblings who are very close, and one of the siblings passes away and the other one just does not grieve. It's not relevant to the depth of the relationship that they had. And number 15, abbreviated grief is when someone moves through their grief quickly based on the expectations of those around them. Too often, lost travelers are told to move on and get over it. You may have even been on the receiving end of someone saying, "Aren't you over that yet?" Don't let somebody else push you through your grief, okay? Absent grief is no grief at all. This frequently happens in the aftermath of anticipatory grief, which is that with cases of cancer or mental health. You've already done a large deal of grieving, and they find it not necessary to grieve further. So losing somebody in the physical from cancer or mental, there's a lot of pre-grieving that actually happens with that. And once the person is passed, you may not feel that it's necessary. So I really want to get real with you here and take an honest look at yourself and really see where you are on this grief. And if you're finding that your grief is prolonged, or if you have some issues and mental health issues, I suggest that you seek a professional, counselor or a therapist. But if you feel that you're still struggling, but it's not at one of these deeper levels, I would love to meet with you. I am an author. I've written Life After Child Loss, The Mother's Survival Guide to Cope and Find Joy. I'm also a grief coach and a health and wellness expert. So I understand your pain and your heartache. It's not an easy journey. So please reach out to me. And the best way to do that is through my website, and that's thegriefspecialist.com. And the is THEE, grief, GRIEF, specialist, SPECIALIST.com. And there's a place to set up a 50-minute discovery session or request further information. So I look forward to hearing from you and helping you process through your grief. That's what I'm here for. I've been through it twice, and I have the experience to help you through this.